Live from Rialto, California, Mark Flores presents Retro Collecting 101. Now here's your host, Mark Flores. Thank you. This is another installment of Retro Collecting 101. I'm your host, Mark Flores. Tonight we are going to be talking about 3 Nintendo 64 games that get a bad reputation, but are actually pretty good to play. And I can attest to this due to the fact that I've played these 3 games, and from time to time I conversate with local retro collectors, and they usually have nothing but bad things to say about these games, but to me, on the contrary, I believe that these games are actually pretty fun to play. Tonight's Retro Collecting 101 episode is brought to you by none other than Game Swappers. Game Swappers, buy, sell, and trade your retro games and next-gen consoles. That's Xbox One and PS4. You could come into contact with Game Swappers via Instagram at GAMESWAPPERS. That's GAMESWAPPERS. Game Swappers, buy, sell, and trade. Okay, so these 3 games that I have kept pretty close to the chest for now. I haven't mentioned them on any form of my social media. They are Tonic Trouble, Fighting Force 64, and Earthworm Jim 3D. I'm not going to go that extensive into these games. I'm just going to give you basically the gist of these games. Just to bring to light the fact that these are good games. Tonic Trouble from the good guys over at Ubisoft came up with this game to counter what was going on during the time of the late 90s. We're talking issues with the environment. We're talking storylines that coincide with environmental issues. And along these lines, these things were mounting up to a fever pitch. Eventually, you ended up getting your environmental issues with Al Gore and all this. But what I want to tell you is that during the time in the late 90s, you had issues where people were spraying things into the environment that were actually bad for the ozone layer. And the fact that we had an ozone layer hole, the size of a small state over in the South Pole. But just to bring to the point is that we had an issue with environmental subjects over in the late 90s. Tonic Trouble is a very hilarious story. A gentleman by the name of Agent Ed spills a can to the earth all the way from his mothership. This can ends up spilling into the earth, coming into contact with various animals and various lakes and nature backgrounds, and ends up causing a bunch of trouble, a bunch of issues, because these sheep start morphing. Little tomatoes start forming into actual like killer tomatoes. Kind of having the face of the animated Attack of the Killer Tomatoes for all those 90s, for those 80s babies that do remember that. This is nothing but your standard collect to progress video game. You need to recover 6 items to actually fix this catapult that this doctor is actually going to fix for you, so you can catapult onto the last level. You need all 6 of them. And then you also need various other items to progress your new abilities, to progress throughout certain sections of the level. And with Tonic Trouble, you're actually immersed into a very quirky 3D environment. It's actually quite fun to play. Myself, I played it when I was little. I do actually enjoy this game a lot, just because the opening segment involves you actually snowboarding, not snowboarding, but like snow sliding into the first level. I think it's a very good and humorous story. I think there's a lot of sarcasm, and that's what a lot of video games back in the late 90s actually kind of lacked. With the Nintendo 64, you had this bar standard where you actually needed to have to be very, I would say, very contributing to the children. Games like Conker's Bad Fur Day and games like I'm going to mention later is Earthworm Jim 3D actually bring out an environment and dialogue that actually attributes to the late teen to the actual early adult age, where you had sarcasm and innuendos and double meanings. Because with double meanings and innuendos, you're actually able to get away with a lot more if you're able to catch it. That is the rub of innuendos and double meanings, is that if you get it, then that's where it becomes the punchline to the joke. Otherwise, it will go over the head like most people. This game is a collect quest, but it provides you with a lot more variety than normal collect quest games. I think Tonic Trouble looks very, very gorgeous. The levels do look very nice. The humor of actually, there's one to mention, is that you actually face this killer cob of corn that after you defeat it, it actually sinks into the lava pit where it actually turns into popcorn. And if you have played the game, Agent Ed, the main character to this game, actually powers up into Super Ed with actually consuming popcorn. So I think it's kind of funny. Tonic Trouble now goes for around $5 to $7. I recently checked this out via price charting a couple minutes ago, and so that's reasonably that's actually a good price for games these days. And it's a very decent platformer. It gets a bad rep with some people, but with me and how I played it back in the beginning, I think it is an actual good platforming game. I think most platformers with the Nintendo 64 had an issue because you went from going to a 16-bit 2D environment to now you're going to a 3D environment, and with most platforming games, it's harder to go to a third dimension and add depth and depth perception. It's a lot more difficult to do that because now you have to adjust the camera angles as such. The game itself is really good. I speak nothing but good things about it. There is a few bad things to mention, but I think they honestly overshadow the good things of this game. I think this game is quirky. I think it's fun. I think the dialogue amongst characters is pretty humorous, and it's fairly easy. And the conclusion of the game is actually well worth all the trouble of collecting all these items. I think collect quests in some games actually bring longevity to the play value of the games. So there's nothing bad to say about collect quests in video games. But let me go on to this next game of Fighting Force 64. But before that, let me tell you about this Game Swappers promotion that I'm actually going to start doing. To those who know, Game Swappers is a proud sponsor of my show. And I am a proud supporter of Game Swappers themselves. But for those who actually pay attention, they know, you guys do know I do 2 promotions per day for this per episode for this actual establishment. To those online and to those that I know in person, I have a very special promotion for you, and the manager of Game Swappers has actually let me do this for the podcast due to the fact that these podcast episodes, Retro Collecting 101, Pay-Per-Review Wrestling Podcast, and the very humorous Mark and Andre show, we actually have a promotion now. For those that actually share via Instagram or share via Facebook my actual show, all they have to do is actually share it and share my link or share my page, share my episodes. Do it via Instagram or do it via Facebook, and we'll actually give you 10% off towards any game through Game Swappers, or 10% more towards your trade-ins. For whatever you trade in, we'll give you 10% more, or for you actually purchasing a game, we'll actually give you 10% off. Only if you mention my podcast via Instagram or via Facebook, or even do it coming into the store. But make sure you actually show the manager or anyone that's helping them out that day to actually just show them the actual screenshot, or just show them that you're sharing the actual podcast. For that, you'll get the promotional offer that I've provided via this podcast. I'm going to mention it quite often in every actual episodes that I'm doing now, but just to let you know that this promotion is fairly new. So once again, if you share a screenshot of you letting someone else know about the podcast, sharing the podcast via Facebook, sharing the podcast via Instagram, Game Swappers will give you 10% off, 10% off any purchase, or 10% off your 10% more towards your trade-ins. So just to let you guys know that promotion. The next game that I have on the docket here is Fighting Force 64. Came out in 97, and I believe Crave Entertainment actually came out with this game. This game is actually a very good fighting game. A lot of people pan it, but me, myself, and a lot of my friends that do like playing beat 'em up games, we actually enjoy this game. There's a lot of banter you can use and have a good time with in this game. There's tons of weapons. You're able to use 9mm pistols. You're able to use bazookas, shotguns, axes, poles, televisions, trash cans. I mean, the amount of weapons in this game itself is very, very entertaining. I mean, it's very good to use all these weapons, because as you progress through the level, your basic hand-to-hand combat actually won't do you that well. You need to actually use all these weapons, so you actually are able to take less damage, because going to hand-to-hand combat with the elevated characters throughout the game as you progress is going to be a lot more difficult. So the environments in Fighting Force 64 are fully interactive. You play about 8 levels until you get to the boss as Dr. Zen. Every environment's pretty awesome. You start with going into the Dr. Zen building, and then the next level you actually go to Midtown of a busy skyscraper-esque populated city, and then you go to the subway. It's just really cool. It's typical beat 'em up Final Fight style levels, where you have subway levels and stuff like that. Very, very entertaining in my opinion. You have the ability of having 4 playable characters. You have the overall good main protagonist, and then you actually have the big brute, and then you have 2 female characters that one's super quick and one's quick and a little stronger than the other. But you have 4 playable characters total. I know for sure you're able to play with 2 characters at the same time. I haven't done it to where you're able to play for the 3rd and the 4th. The N64 expansion pack actually assists you with providing you more cutscenes. It brings some of it doesn't do that much in graphical enhancements, but you're actually able to get more cutscenes. I haven't noticed that much of a big difference between the two from there. The 3D environments are the weakness of not just this beat 'em up game, but with all beat 'em up games going to a 3D environment. They have some bugs. Yeah, there's some bugs to mention in this game itself, but for what you have at the base of this kind of game, you see that you're able to do what you need to do in a beat 'em up game. You're actually able to use weapons. You're actually able to punch people and stuff like that. I mean, it's really, what more do you need in a 3D beat 'em up game than to punch, kick, and shoot weapons, and then progress and be able to move appropriately? I'd say if a bad beat 'em up game would consist of you not being able to do any of those 3, and then you have an issue. But the game gets it right with all 3 of those, and they actually add more to it because you have a lot more weapons. The environments are very interactive, where you're able to lift pots and throw them at people. I think there's a lot of depth to this game, and a lot of people give the game flack for it. The game right now goes for about $15 loose, and that's very good considering most higher tier, well, I'd say mid tier games are about $20 to $25 nowadays. but this game itself, I played it when I was little, and I still play it now. I mean, these games, this genre in general is actually entertaining. You can turn it on, play a couple levels, try to beat the boss, and then turn it off. I mean, there's no real commitment to these kind of games, because the fact is, it's easy to progress through. I mean, if you're able to beat people up in beat 'em up games before, you're going to do a pretty good job here. Your Double Dragons, your Battletoads versus Double Dragons, your Final Fights, your Rival Turfs, those games actually were able to thrive, again, talking about platforming and 3D environments, were able to thrive in a 2D environment because it was linear. This game is still linear, but you're not able to, you're still able to traverse in multiple directions. So the only downside to this genre itself is the fact that sometimes the camera angles aren't really the best to assist you, because with focusing on one side of the level, you might get blindsided by an enemy from behind. So that's just the issue itself there. So, but nonetheless, I do think this game is actually pretty entertaining for the price. For the price of $15, I don't think it's that much. I think it's well worth the value of $15. So that's another game I do recommend for you. It's Fighting Force 64. A lot of people give it a bad rep, but yeah, that's what it is. Definitely pick it up if you haven't already. The last game that I want to mention, and I mentioned this earlier, is Earthworm Jim 3D. This game is kind of teetering on the issue that it might be a little too expensive for all the downside it has. The game itself was developed in 1999 by Rockstar Entertainment, and Rockstar Entertainment, as you know, is still the monarch of game developers now. I mean, you know, Grand Theft Auto, the Monster Truck series for the N64. And a few other games to mention, but Rockstar Entertainment did make this game. The good things to say about Earthworm Jim 3D is that it's different than the Earthworm Jim 1 and 2. But with those two games, it's kind of hard to top those games, because now you're going, again, I hate to reiterate, but it is the issue that we have with most games going from 16 to the next gen consoles. You have 2D environments going into a 3D environment, platforming game. The game starts off with Earthworm Jim actually having a cow fall on him, and he's actually stuck inside his mind in a coma. His friend, his dog friend, actually helps him out inside his mind into 4 worlds. You have, I think it's memory, fear, happiness, and I think it's fantasy. You have 4 different levels to progress through, all of which have its own boss level and 2 different worlds. So it's kind of like how you have your overworld maps, like in Super Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie. You have your overworld, and then you have the levels within said worlds after you go into them. The one thing to mention is this overworld environment and the various levels have gorgeous graphics. And to complement it, you have a Banjo-Kazooie-esque type of world where everything's very big. You still have everything inside the worlds that you go through is still linear. You're able to, there's A's and B's to go through, but you still have little side missions to go out through. Every single one of these characters have something very sarcastic to say. The script involved is very humorous. I like this game a lot. I remember playing this game when I was little as well. I thought it was very difficult just because you had camera angles that you had to maneuver first before you get blindsided again by enemies. But after you get away from all that, it's actually a really good, cool game to play. Especially if you're a fan of the Earthworm Jim series beforehand anyway. Earthworm Jim 1 and 2, and then you have this third installment, 3D. I thought when I was little, I thought this was actually going to be a very, very good game. But once again, if if you don't keep the consistency of keeping the same developers and keeping the same crew, it's kind of like you deviate from the original origins and stuff. But other than that, I mean, this classic, the things to build off of is like you have good levels, you have a classic Earthworm Jim feel where everything's, you know, the same shtick of like refrigerators falling on people and the weapons. I think it's very entertaining. I mean, you even have a meat cleaver that you can throw at cows and cows get beheaded. I think that's freaking hilarious. There's one section where you have to get this guy's documents. Well, it seems like in the original back and forth that you have, he's all like, "You need to collect my briefs that I've left somewhere." And Earthworm Jim asks, "Well, what are you talking about? Like important top secret documents?" He's like, "No, like my underwear. Look, I forgot my briefs over there. Go get them." I think it's just really funny to see that, to actually have that in there. Just sarcastic tones. You have that. You have actual characters that sound real funny. There's actually a general called Mussolini who's actually still a cow. So I thought that was still funny. After you traverse throughout these 4 levels, each of them have their own boss. You have Psychro. You have the man. You have that man that has I think it was like his face, the man with the body on the other side of his head, Bob the Killer Fish, and then the spoiler for the last level, I thought was hilarious because it's just something you don't expect from a game, but with being involved into psychology, it's kind of funny. The last boss at the end of this game is actually Earthworm Kim. Earthworm Kim is the feminine side of Earthworm Jim. And during the back and forth of Earthworm Jim and Earthworm Kim, it's actually pretty funny because that is some men's ultimate enemy is that their feminine side. A lot of guys don't actually invest any emotion into their feminine side. And that's the funny thing about Earthworm Jim is that he actually says that he doesn't attribute himself more to his feminine side than he should. There's a funny bit of dialogue that's in there that says that, our feminine side, that we need a few things from men all the time. I think it involved, she said 2 things, and then she actually said, "We also need your credit cards." So I thought that was funny. I thought that was a good rib at just a good funny joke. Especially because it's still involving the feminine side. But after you beat all 4 of these bosses, then you actually get the final touch of this level. And I won't spoil that much of the ending for you, but it's still funny because it's still consistent with the Earthworm Jim universe that we're all used to. One bad thing to note about this is it's just platforming camera issues. That's the only bad gripe this game gets. A lot of people who aren't really versed in platforming games don't like these kind of games. And that habit usually is consistent when you play other games as well. I'll give you an example. A guy that is not good at Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo won't necessarily be better in an environment that still involves platforming, but now you have 3D environments and elements as well. And then you have to fix the camera angles to keep progressing. That way you don't get hit with any projectiles that you don't see coming. But if you are savvy in platforming games, this is where you actually can wear your stripes proudly, because you can actually traverse through this just by manipulating the camera angle to help to better assist you progress through these platforms. And the only bad thing to say about this game, and this is where it actually some people fail to mention, because some of them don't really actually play this game at all. They just hear the reviews and just go from there. Every boss level requires you to do pig surfing, and the main thing about these end levels is that you face the boss of the last section of the world. And you have an objective to actually collect 100 marbles. The boss is actually trying to collect marbles as well, and you deplete their marble count by shooting missiles at them. So this could go back and forth for a long time. I remember playing against Psychro for the first time and actually going at it with him for like 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, I believe. And it was just, it's painstaking because the camera you have to keep rotating. The pig surfing control is very, very, very slow, very delayed. And then picking up these marbles, I mean, the contact point between the marble and the pig is very, you have to be like actually physically touching. You just can't pass by the marble and grab it. If you don't have enough much patience for this, it could be very bad. I recommend. I don't know whether or not it actually thrives on actual internal memory, but I do remember that I had to use a memory card. Yeah, I think you have to have a memory card as well. So just keep a memory card handy. I'll have to double check that, but like I said, after you beat that boss, if their patience wore thin, I say you take a break from the game and just, you have to start three other levels after the first boss anyway. But Earthworm Jim nowadays goes for, I think, about $20. If you could find it a little cheaper, please grab it. I recommend it myself. The only thing I need to ask of you is that you actually have a lot more patience with the final level, the final boss levels. That's it. But other than that, I wanted to do a special section about sports games on the Nintendo 64. There's a few sports games that I recommend to people from time to time. It's whether, and it's just basically about your taste. I myself like playing golf games on the N64. I like Waylay Country Club Classics. It's a golf game. It's pretty cool. I enjoy it. I recently grabbed it from GameSwappers Complete in Box for a good deal. That was one of the first games that I've actually got as a birthday present. And I remember it involved a story with my mom, and I told my mom I wanted Gauntlet Legends for my birthday. And I don't know whether I didn't say it correctly, but I actually ended up getting a golf game. So I don't know whether she mistook Gauntlet for golf, but probably the way I enunciated that was a little askew, and then hence I got the Waylay Country Club game, and now I like golf games. Then I actually recommend Kobe Bryant and NBA Courtside. I think the graphics on that game for that time is actually pretty impressive. The realism of where you actually have to shoot at a right point to actually score a basket is pretty impressive. And International Superstar Soccer is actually a very good game for the N64. I myself do like soccer games on the N64. But those are the few games I like to mention, and all three of those games are still, except for International Superstar Soccer, that game's a little pricier. But Kobe Bryant, NBA Courtside, and Waylay Country Club Golf, and various other, and the NBA Live series for the N64 is good as well. Those are still $5 or less. You can even grab them in like a bargain bin at GameSwappers. Those are still fairly cheap. Not to mention a bunch of wrestling games. I mean, still wrestling games are still fairly cheap just because they were made in mass quantities along with other sports games. So those are the three games that get a bad rep for the N64, but are actually pretty entertaining. I myself can attest to them. I actually played them myself very extensively, and that's why I held them pretty close to the chest, because they actually hold a significant part with me, because I do enjoy those games. And also you have a couple other sports games that I did recommend, but I wanted to conclude this Retro Collecting 101 episode with the commercials here. This episode of Retro Collecting 101 was brought to you by GameSwappers. GameSwappers, buy, sell, and trade your retro games and next-gen consoles, Xbox One and PS4. You could come into contact with GameSwappers via Instagram at GAMESWAPPERS. That's GAMESWAPPERS. GameSwappers, buy, sell, and trade. Remember, guys, you'll get 10% off your purchase of any game or games. And you'll actually get 10% off, 10% more towards your trades if you mention my podcast, if you share my podcast via Instagram, via Facebook, and you show the screenshot to either me or the guys at GameSwappers so I can vouch for you. So just to let you know, I'm going to actually have the Mark and Andre show on Friday or Saturday as scheduled, and I'm actually going to try to do another I'm going to see what happens during SmackDown on Thursday to give you guys an update, because I want to do a Monday Night Raw and a SmackDown combined storyline update. But other than that, you guys have a good night. Thank you for tuning in live for Retro Collecting 101. Thank you. Good night.